Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Zenway podcast. I'm your host, Zenway. In this podcast, we talk everything about life, tech, and career. Today, I have a very, very dear friend with me, and I dare say he has been there for me in terms of actually quite pivotal career moments. He is also one of my first college friends as well. We'll talk a little bit about that story if you're interested in a bit. He's also currently doing his PhD as well in the UK. Most importantly, I think, why I wanted to have this conversation was really, both of us shared a lot of academic and also, I think, professional interests as well. And he is at the very heart of actually serving the refugees community as well. So I thought that this is a story that is worth sharing. I'm very excited about this conversation. But before that, let's get everybody to know Douglas. Why not you introduce yourself a little bit to the audience?
Yep. Thanks for having me, as always, Zen. First of all, I want to reciprocate what you said. I think we've had a lot of encounters, a relationship that has gone in this intertwining way, I would say. So it goes both ways. You've been there for me too in many different ways, and I'm happy to have this conversation. So at this point, I'm doing my PhD, as you've already mentioned, and I'm in the heart of refugee work, trying my best to go deeper, to find better ways to serve the refugee community here. It's a difficult space to be in. I've been here in this space for about 7 years now. And finally, at the point where I said, hey, I really need more knowledge, a deeper understanding, and that's why I thought it's time to do a PhD, and to appreciate, what's happening really with the refugee situation, because it's a complex issue, and we definitely need more creative solutions. So I think that's also a little bit about myself doing a lot of startup stuff, social entrepreneurship, dabbling in non-profit work. And I think those were the conversations that we've had too, right?
Yeah.
And we've connected about stuff like that. How do we start things, when it comes to education that is more radical, that everybody can be part of. So happy to have this conversation with you.
Yeah. We'll probably kind of go through this conversation in several parts, right? We can talk for hours. I think both our partners.
Do we want to do that? We can.
We're not at the level of Joe Rogan where we're able to kind of do a 2-3 hours podcast, but we'll see how it goes, right? I think the first part is I wanted to kind of deep dive into obviously your work in the refugee space. I wanted to kind of also talk about I guess the social entrepreneurship and the startup things that we've done, and finally, obviously, you always recommend me very interesting books to read, and I want to kind of provide that value to more people as well, right? But first and foremost, which seem to be a trend on my podcast now, is that you're also a psychology major, obviously because you are my friend, right?
Yeah.
I've never asked you this question. I don't think I have. So that question is really, what made you choose psychology as your major?
Oh, come to think of it, I haven't shared it with you. I think
right?
so. Yeah.
So why
It's a great question, man. I was Form 4.
Wow. Okay.
Suddenly,
Yeah.
Suddenly this story is emerging, isn't it? And in public too. That's great, man. In school, I actually came across a psychology book in the library. I think it was an intro to psychology book, something like that.
Wow.
Okay. So I can't even remember what's about, but there were some things about forensic psychology, I reckon. So about
serial killers.
No. It's more like forensic psychology as in eyewitness testimony and stuff like that.
Right. The reliability of memory and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was super interested in that. So that was probably the only book I ever borrowed from the library.
Wow.
And I read that and I thought, hey, I want to do psychology lah. That was Form 4.
Yeah.
And I also was I was thrown into a vice presidency of a club called the Kiwanis Club, back then.
Yes.
It's a
It's a social service.
Yeah, it's a social service kind of thing.
Yeah.
A little bit like the Rotary Club, but
Yeah, they were the yeah, I guess the Kiwanis and the Key Club are quite similar in that sense.
yes, you're right.
The
So the
Kiwanis
Key
and the
Club
Key-
is like the school version of the Kiwanis Club. You're right.
Yes.
Yeah. So you know very well, no?
Yeah.
And one of the things that we did was to how to say to spread awareness about Down syndrome children.
Yeah.
You know, so I've had that experience
Yes.
in school.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that kind of cemented, my desire to be in the psychology degree. And of course, as the psychology students of our generation would say, there's only one place you did psychology back then.
Yes.
Right, and that's how.
That's how we end up.
Yeah, that's how we ended up in the foundation, no?
Yes.
And
Yeah. I remember that we did psychology together, and it was the first psychology subject. I think in Psychology 101, I think we were so gung-ho that we wanted to
yeah.
bloody ace that subject, right? And there was
Yeah.
a presentation component to it, and you need to basically present about a psychological subject and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned a word in the beginning that probably fits your profile as well, being radical, because I think the subject that we have chose to present was understanding rape.
Yeah.
And we
Oh,
called
man, those were the days, man.
yeah, we called ourselves neo-Freudians, remember?
Yes.
My god, cringe 100%. But
we did well.
we did well. We
So
chose
we must have done something right.
exactly. I think we chose the most controversial topic at that point of time, and we chose the topic that was very, very hard to, I guess, even speak to. But we did our research and stuff, and that was plenty fun. So I think we even went into like researching law, what constitute rape, what doesn't constitute. It was really, really eye-opening at that point of time. Yeah.
And we were in foundation, mind you, no? I mean,
Yeah.
fresh out of, for your case, government school, and for my case, private school. But,
Yeah.
we didn't have that sort of exposure, isn't it?
Yeah, we
and
didn't.
and that kind of topic is really, really something that is, it's taboo. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of psychology back then, the awareness was low, and all these were taboo too.
For sure. Yeah, and I think that kind of continues the thread around, I guess, after graduating as well, in terms of talking about gray areas, underserved areas, and taboo areas, right? Sometimes it's very hard to even talk about, refugees and their status here sometimes as well, right? So your path to serving the community of refugees is not an immediate one. I recall that very quite clearly. You took on a few roles after graduating, right? So I wanted to kind of just unpack that a little bit in terms of, what's that path that you took into serving the community, and I guess what are some of the takeaways from each of those chapters, right? Yeah.
I think for us studying psychology, usually
Yeah.
if you are not one of those that I don't really know what to do, I will just do psychology to to get along.
That's one kind. Yeah.
If you're not that kind, you are probably seeking for something, isn't it? There's something you want to understand a little bit, what your situation is. You wanted to understand others.
Sometimes for yourself, right?
Yeah. And I think it's really that reflection process that, that just keeps on going,
Right.
Even as you do psychology. And when I was, the first couple of years when I did psychology, I thought I would love, biology and stuff like that. It didn't do well. I think I got a D for subjects like that.
That subject was hard, man.
Yeah. Oh, that was crazy.
Yeah.
But some people aced it.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
and for me, I was quite taken by the more philosophical areas of psychology. Why do we fear death, right? Something that haunted me a lot back then, right? So what does it all mean? So if I die and there's nothing left, what happens, and that sense of fear and stuff like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think my psychology journey has been that that search for meaning, to really make sense, why I'm like that, where am I going from here, and I think after a while, I thought I wanted to go deeper into psychology. Study even more. So back then I was thinking about all these philosophical questions, and I thought, I want to do a master's in that area and stuff like that. So I went into, to do a master's in this thing called cultural studies. It's an intersectional area. There's a little bit of philosophy, there's a little bit of history, politics, psychology, all going in together, right? Freud is at the center of it, but I'm not going to explain how. And
That's another podcast altogether.
Yes, I'm happy to do another one for you. But but at that point, what I realized is that the deeper you go, there has to be an outlet, because you can keep going inwards, but if there's no way out, you end up being feeling a bit alone. In the midst of all these books and ideas and the reality of the world and stuff like that. And I think there was a desire to actually do something. There needs to be an outlet for action, right? There needs to be an outlet for meeting with people, to talk to the people who are affected and stuff like that. Right. And I think at that point I started to realize, I think I want to go back, to serve the community.
Right. And was there were you experiencing a situation, a social setting? Was it something that you saw, you read? Was there something that kind of prompted that?
I think it's it's a very personal encounter to me. So there is a moment where I felt that I must be doing this for some reason. And when I was reflecting on myself, I started thinking, I read all these books, who is it really for? I'm saying that, I'm getting involved in politics, blah blah, but is it my ego? When I'm helping, is it because I really wanted to help, or is it because of my own pride and stuff like that? And I realized that it is meaningless if there is no other. Right. In that equation, and to me that's a spiritual awakening of sorts, isn't it? So I think I realized then, there's this sense of a calling, to actually go down to the community and to be with people,
right?
And I think there must have been something correct about that decision, because I've been there for 7 years now.
And how do you? There's so many. Unfortunately, there are so many communities that are in need. How did you ended up serving this very community, right? What was that story like?
So when I started, working with Young Lives, which is the non-profit organization I'm working for right now, we wanted to provide education for marginalized youth, right? And I think in the first iteration of our program, it was supposed to be local poor youth and migrants. It wasn't even refugees, it was just and migrants, because we didn't really know any better,
Yeah.
But I think as time went by, we realized that actually the people who are knocking on our doors are the refugees.
Right.
And those, it could be the geographical location, because we are right at the city center, and there are a lot of refugees around the area.
Yeah.
So maybe that could be a reason, but I like to think about it more as a connection and opening of doors. That we were seen, and there was a sense of connection, that we continue building on until today.
Yeah. And in terms of you talk about iterations, right? I wanted to also kind of talk about something that you mentioned at the top of the show. Initially, it was only this few, I guess, programs and the way it was ran. So when you went in, what did you see the immediate need was back then? And, what kind of iterations have you done, since then as well? I mean, I was part of some of these chapters as well, right? So, maybe share a little bit about, I guess, to shed light on the situation on the refugee group in terms of what are the needs are, and how do you, I guess, adapt to their needs as well.
So just a little bit of background, no. So the refugee issue here, if I were to really simplify it, of course there's conflict at home, right?
Yes.
That's kind of why refugees flee from their country into our country, no. And the main issue with refugees here in Malaysia is that they are considered illegal.
Yeah.
Right. So there's this thing called the UNHCR, or the Commission for Refugees convention, which is basically the refugee law, right? That determines the status of refugees, and Malaysia is not a signatory to that. So basically, they don't recognize refugees, no. And what happens then is that the rights that are supposed to be granted to refugees, and indeed even human beings, are not accorded to them because you are illegal, you are an alien, and therefore you don't have rights, right? So you are in a sense a criminal here, and so you don't have access to education. Needless to say, you don't have access to work. You cannot own property here. You don't even have documentation. UNHCR provides documentation, but that's not
Legally binding.
Yeah, some scholars say that it's extra legal, right? So it's somewhere between legal and illegal.
Right. Yeah.
That's the best way we could characterize that.
Yeah.
And that's why education is one of these issues that is, that all the refugee communities are concerned about. And a lot of communities have their own community schools for young people, right? So because if there are kids here, they will need to go to school, right? But there is a niche area that is not covered as much, which is the young adults. So these are people who are already working, but they haven't finished school, or they haven't gone on to tertiary education. Tertiary education rates for refugees are between 1% to 3%. Minus completion, minus the understanding of completion, because we don't know how many actually complete, and we don't know at what level that they complete it. So it could be even a diploma level, a certificate level, degree level. Those are not documented, right? So it's between 1% to 3%. In Malaysia, it's closer to 1%. No, and that's kind of why we said, hey, actually for us in Young Lives, what we want to provide is a sense of being able to develop young adults in terms of their personal development. So their soft skills, their character, their leadership, and at the same time provide them some professional development as well. Certification that they will otherwise not be able to get. Why? Because they haven't finished schooling, or they just don't have the time, the resources to be able to do that. And yeah, so we started, a program that has English, IT, personal development, and our hope back then was to say that if they had these skills, instead of being dishwashers at the back, maybe they could go to the front of the counter, right, and be a receptionist. Maybe it pays more, they have chance to actually communicate and things like that. So that was the logic, I think, behind the programs that we came up with.
Yeah. And so you talked about, I think when we were talking about this, right, we were talking about how do we then overcome the challenges of any kind of non-profit where resources are scarce, and like the it's just very hard to be able to find quality resources to be able to continue to fund the outcomes that you want. And you still chose this path for 7 years, right? I remember one time you talked about socioeconomic status mobility, social mobility, right? Moving up the socioeconomic status. Sometimes this education work that you're doing, you may not be able to see the fruits until the very next generation. And that's a very, very long game. So I'm wondering, there must be some stories or some experiences that you have that kept you going, and I wanted to take this opportunity to ask you as well, because I don't think at a personal level I have asked you this question, and I think it's probably something that is I believe that something's worthwhile to share on this course as well, right? So do you have any stories that kept you going?
Yeah. For me, you know, I like to consider myself an educator. I like to,
Yeah.
you know, and you are right, no. I think the one of these concepts that we like to talk about is the idea of the infinite game, isn't it?
Yeah,
And when it comes down to this, firstly, you know, the non-profit game is usually a loser's game in a competitive world, isn't it? You know, because of lack of resources, because it's manned by people with goodwill, but not necessarily having the sort of specialization, you know, that resources can make happen, right? And that's why, you know, a lot of it is trying our best to build whatever we have, right? And to impact the people that we can. That's really the, you know, that's really the approach. Another probably less positive way of saying it is we are fighting fire all the time, you know. But
Yeah.
but that's why, you know, a lot of what kept us going, me, my team going, is the fruits, right? The single stories that, you know, we hold on to until today.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
And one such example is, I believe this also, you know, is the sort of impact that we want to have. You know? We trained somebody in Young Lives,
Yep.
right? They were our alumni. And then after that we sent them off to a sister institute of ours, you know, to do a certificate in pastoral work, community development, if you will, you know. So she finished another 9 months. She hasn't finished school, right? So she doesn't have a school leaving cert. It's coming back to bite her once she's resettled, but we can talk about that in a bit, no?
Yeah.
She now has a certificate, and then she went on to become a social worker. And it's significant. Why? Because she was a social worker for not just a community, but the locals who, the local women who were abused, you know, by their husbands and stuff like that, and went to a shelter. You know? And I think this is the sort of impact that we want to create. You know, it's not just a transmission. It's not just the creation of people who are good at things, but the transmission of our values, isn't it? What we believed in is, you know, if we do good, you know, others would take that energy and also channel it back out, right? And I believe we saw that, and that's the kind of thing that we hope will continue going.
Right. And this person has then also resettled in another country as well.
Yeah. So she's been recently resettled. The personal moment of mine was, you know, being able to send her off, you know, in the airport.
And where's she going?
She went to the US.
Wow.
And it was amazing. It was an amazing experience, lah. You know, knowing that you know, you've contributed in some way to somebody's development.
Yeah.
And she's not leaving with nothing. You know, there was something that, you know, she could take with her in terms of the skills that she developed, you know, the progress that she's earned here, and I think the people and the connections as well.
Right. You know, these kind of stories are so profound when I encounter it, because this is really changing somebody's life to something that they could probably at that point of time couldn't even imagine.
Yeah.
They probably were, I guess, less hopeful at that point of time, right? So I think being able to cling on to that and have that fire to kind of keep thinking about how you can change the way you work to be able to create more of those fruits and stories is something that I've seen you know, continue to do for the past many years, right? And we always talk about like revamping the so-called business model, right? The way your organization functions, right? You've gone through, if you can count, you know, how many iterations now? 7, 8, countless.
Yeah. I wouldn't know how to quantify them.
Yeah.
A lot,
right? So what surprised you or what didn't? Let's talk about what it was and what it became to in more concrete terms, right? So that, you know, our audience can understand. Because you were talking about non-profit in a way that is, you know, quite dependent on I guess, grants and funding, right? And what you aspire it to be, right? What surprised you? What didn't surprise you in that journey of changing it? I'm sure there are many examples in the world. Some has succeeded, some has not, right? So curious to kind of know, your story as well in terms of, what surprised you, what you didn't when you're transforming the business model of the organization, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm. The I think when it comes to non-profit, sustainability is always a question. The reason is because you are always running a tight ship, and you will never have enough to provide people. The needs of people are increasing.
Yeah.
Sadly, for the refugee situation, it's also true. The number of refugees grows every year, and we find that there are more and more issues that we have to go into. So as a non-profit organization, the typical way of doing things is to raise donations and to write proposals so that you get in funding for the activities that you do. What we thought early on was, firstly, it's not sustainable. Secondly, there is still some stigma and discrimination against refugees here in Malaysia, that makes it quite difficult for local funders, local donors to be able to contribute to the cause. So we thought it's time for us to think about a business model, right? And that's when I started to explore social enterprise stuff. Maybe we can start charging people for the programs that they do, just a minor amount that forms like 10-20% of the income, and maybe that can help us sustain a little bit longer. But I think what we realized after a year or so is that sometimes this business models sound nice on paper but doesn't work in practice. The reason behind that is, of course, the refugees or any local poor, for instance, their money is already tight.
Yeah.
They have a sense of scarcity, a scarcity mindset that kind of limits
survival,
the choices
right?
that they have. So when they make their choices about where to spend money on, would it really be an English class that they might not see results of 2-3 years down the line?
Yeah.
Or would they say maybe this can maybe this is even better if I donate it to my church, because I know that it's going somewhere that is really, really tangible, and that's God. So in the midst of all these choices, we realized that the social enterprise model sounds great, but it's not so easy to implement. And that's, I think at that point we realized it's actually okay if we go the non-profit route, but of course we still have to be a bit more creative about how we sustain ourselves and things like that. So one outcome of that is, I think we became more creative with our programs, because we realized that running programs is something that is very labor intensive. Labor intensive means time cost, and time cost is also money.
Yes.
This kind of equation, I never knew I would understand this when I was studying, but suddenly it made sense. And in the midst of that, we realized that actually there's just so much competition among all of us. All the NGOs, there are like 200 refugee schools, but nobody is collaborating to do programs. And the question is why? And that's why we started taking an approach where let's work with organizations, right? Different organizations. You contribute a bit, I contribute a bit. We try to make it cross communities instead of I serve only my community, you serve only your community, and we try to bring these things together. And I think we've been having some impact, some impact that we haven't seen before. And I have a feeling that, so this is probably a bit more specialized non-profit talk, but I believe that funding proposals of the future will be like this, right? Will be these collaborations between organizations and communities, who all see a common issue that they can't tackle by themselves, but we have expertise that we can bring together. And I suspect that philanthropists, donors would like to see stuff like this today,
right.
And I think we are on the right path now.
Right. And have you found the reason as to why has nobody done this before? Because it's blatantly obvious, right? Or is it the case where I just listened to this yesterday that talks about how the easiest thing to do is also the easiest thing to not do. Is it just a case where people they just didn't do it, right? Or they were fighting fire every day so that they didn't even bother, even though it was just a knock away or an email away.
Yeah, I think there are different kinds of ideas, the different kinds of ideologies that are involved, lah. So firstly, there's a sense of competition. I think a lot of non-profits these days, they too adopt the startup mindset. I'm talking about the younger ones now, lah. They adopt the startup mindset and
they have to differentiate to stand out to win the most funding.
Yeah, and that works to our detriment, lah. For the older organizations, it's just the way things are done. The running an activity for a very long time, gaining very significant expertise, and and building that just like a corporation almost. And what's absent from this discussion is the idea of a systemic thinking,
Right.
that the refugee issue I can't solve by myself. How as of today, the refugees have no legal status. I can provide programs, you can provide programs, but does that solve the problem? It doesn't, right? And the only way to go about that is through collaborations. And that, I think, is something that people are beginning to see, but not as fast as we hope.
Right.
There are organizations that are doing stuff like this, and that's those are the organizations that we work with.
Right. Talking about seeing finally some organizations have seen
the light.
What are you hoping to achieve in the next couple of years? For, I guess maybe it could be two-pronged, right? One is for the refugee community, and one for the organization. I guess they're interlinked, right? But essentially, what do you see, your team and yourself achieving in the next couple of years, right?
I think right now, the first thing is to just prove a model, right? To prove a point,
right?
To prove that we were right,
that coming together to collaborate is much better for everyone.
Means something,
I
right?
see. Right.
And I think in practice that's what we've been doing, and we will continue to do that.
Right.
We've made a conscious decision to never just roll up programs by ourselves.
Right.
And we mean what we say, and at the end of the day, we also share resources. Whatever we have, we share it with other organizations who would, want to enter the space,
Right.
And this is, I guess this is the equivalent of, if you believe in environmental change, I do my part in segregating the trash, And at the organizational level, perhaps that's what we are doing, If I believe that change has to come collectively, I do it by practicing collaboration. I do it by sharing whatever I have with others who want to do similar work, and not hoarding things like, the curriculum that I have, not hoarding the funds that I have. If there is a project, we can do it together. Let's get money together. We don't have to fight over it. So that's one, to prove that point that it works. And I think results-wise, we can see some things.
Right.
And my goal at the end is to be able to coordinate, it sounds very lofty, coordinate, but it's really about, having a movement of different organizations that would really be able to lobby and to advocate for change at the larger scale, instead of just 30 people in a classroom. So that's our hope, and I think we begin to understand that we have to think as a movement. So it's not about young lives being able to lead this, but Young Lives is able to be part of this movement to pull people in,
Right.
to be in this ship together.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like the challenges are quite similar in, I guess, even in the professional world when you want to make a big change to happen, right? First of all, there's a lot of stakeholder management. Second of all, there's a lot of change management that you need to do when it comes to, how we collaborate at the, I guess, organizing level. But the change management also need to apply to the communities themselves because, the way programs are organized were quite community based, and now you're now opening up to a different, a wider perspective as well, and what does that entail? Sometimes has that change management as well. I do agree that, there needs to be systemic change as well, because in the professional world, if you can organize all the different talks you want, but at the end of the day, if there are no policy changes, then there's not going to be a lot of, I guess, actual change that can come about it, because the so-called infrastructure is not supporting it as well, right? I'm curious, like, maybe you can name a few, like, I guess, biggest challenge that you're seeing when, trying to do this as well, right? Is it really stakeholder? And, if it's really stakeholder, then, what are they seeing that could be an obstacle, right?
Of course, there will be individual differences. So these are the stakeholder differences that you talk about. Some stakeholders are hard to change, but
is it just political? Is it just personal preference?
Yeah,
worldview?
I like to take a systemic perspective on this and say that, the system creates outcomes that nobody likes. Sometimes that's the system's thinking way of saying it People are stuck in positions that doesn't benefit anyone, but actually sometimes people don't want to be in these situations. I think there was an author who said something along the lines of, sometimes you can't fix systems, and in a sense that if you are the problem, even if I remove you from that system, it doesn't mean that it won't work in the same way. It's because the system has created you in the first place. So no matter what, there will be somebody who replaces that.
Right.
Mahathir might be one of these things, isn't it? He was there, he was removed, but he's still there, And these sorts of things make us think sometimes the question is about how do we fix this? Or is it the simpler answer that is difficult to execute, which is, do we create a new system as a whole? No. Because this sort of system has been there for a long time. The system of competition has been there. The system of non-profit funding has been there. If we were to play in that system and hope that we fix it, we can't. So we can only create it from scratch. That's my sense,
Right.
So to me, it's about getting a bunch of stakeholders who are there for the long game, just like you. And I don't see any other way to really do that. So I suppose in the long story short is, I no longer want to focus on the problems, because the
sure.
problems, I thought we can solve it.
Probably too big for us to solve.
Yeah, and it's too minute at the same time too. Am I really going to fix every single stakeholder? I can't, But I can create a new system and a new way of doing things.
Yeah. I like that approach because, I really did see more innovative approaches that came around, and in terms of the different programs that you guys have ran as well, right? So, let's talk a little bit about that, right? What kind of programs that you've ran recently for trying out these approaches, and what the stakeholders are seeing from this, right? And what the stakeholders are saying about this as well, right?
Yep. So the most recent thing that we are doing right now is a program for newly arrived refugees. So basically, refugees who are just newly arrived, they actually go through a lot. Firstly, they are here sometimes by themselves. So when they travel here, they don't have family members that travel with them, and when they arrive, they are still alone. So for the first 6 months or so, they are just grappling and struggling with stuff, And this is one of the issues that we wanted to deal with, because in Myanmar there was a coup, something that was that is probably invisible to many of us, that the government, the military junta just overthrown the government, and a lot more refugees kind of come from Myanmar. And we said, we have to be able to help them in one way or another. And it's even more pressing. Why? Because when they come here, they will be illegal, isn't it? They will be illegal. They will have very little support. They don't speak the language. So how are they going to manage?
Yeah.
So
from a hot pan into the fire.
Yeah, exactly. From a fire to a hot pan. I would say that, because it's still hot, but it's not as maybe.
Right,
I don't know.
Yeah.
But the point is then to say that, what they really need here, just like any good psychologist, counselor would tell you, is that, is to build a support system. And the support system would hopefully give them two things, isn't it? One is people that they can count on, that they know that they can ask for help when they need it, so they won't feel so alone. And secondly, in terms of skills, knowledge, that they know how to navigate Malaysia. A lot of people are shocked when they come here. I was illegal in my country. I come here, I'm still illegal. Why? So that's the second thing. And the third thing is to say that, in the part of Malaysians, we too have people who would be willing to be with you, right? So this could be people in the communities of the churches around them, who are locals, who say that, hey, I'm in your neighborhood. Maybe I can, if you needed, you need to go to the hospital, maybe I can help you, right? So hopefully with these things, they stand a better chance. That's the model. But what you need for that is actually a lot of stuff, right? Because you need a lot of expertise. Firstly, if it's mental health related stuff, you will need some mental health experts on board. For them to understand the nitty-gritties of the law here, you will need an organization that does labor migration and stuff like that, who will be able to impart that knowledge. And we would need organizations to come on board and say, we are all part of this referral process, and if these refugees need anything, we can just directly connect. So this time round, we piloted this with three other organizations doing law, mental health, and human rights stuff, and the Refugee Alliance, that transcends just their community, and is a combination of different Myanmarese communities. So I think we've managed to do some knowledge sessions so far, and I think they will be better connected once we have other events that we are doing down the line as well.
Right. Yeah, that's super encouraging, because I cannot imagine going to a country where I am considered an alien, and it just limits so many different access to different things as well, right?
Yeah.
So having some semblance of support, some semblance of knowledge in terms of how to navigate things, and I think most importantly, they know that they're not alone. I think that is so much more powerful, and everything else we can take different steps and different timelines to address that, right? It's really, really very important work. I think let's shift gears a little bit. We're close to the hour, and you rightfully pointed out that that you are very philosophical. You have a lot of, I guess, interest in very wide-ranging aspects, I would say, right? And that's why you are the go-to person whenever I need different perspective as well, different resources. So I wanted to also bring that value back to wider community and whoever's listening as well. What are some of the books that I guess maybe recently or all time that are probably fascinating to you, right? And why? Maybe we can start with just a few, right?
I would like to recommend one book.
It sounds like book.
If
If anything else, read this one.
Yes. I mean, to start with, we can talk
Yeah.
about this first.
Okay.
You know, I think this has value not just to academics. You know, so let's not talk about research methodology. I think that's boring stuff. No, so
Important, but
yes,
hard
not
to
for
be a table
everyone.
conversation, I guess.
Yeah. Our podcast will go in a totally different tangent. But
Yeah.
I would like to recommend this book called Dialogue: The Art of Thinking Together by William Isaacs.
Why?
It's a book. To me, I don't know whether I should use this term, but it's the Bible of dialogue, you know. And it's important because what we realize is that a lot of the things that we do when talking, especially collectively, is not dialogue, right? And he gives a good sense about what dialogue is and isn't, lah.
Right.
And there's a fantastic quote, right, that he says, you know, a dialogue is a conversation with a center but no sides. No, and a lot of what we do, firstly, you know, in our meetings and stuff, is rush through stuff, right?
Yeah.
There's an agenda.
Yeah.
We end.
Yeah.
In the middle, we have some compromises, which means that there are some sides. We come to the middle.
Okay.
But there are sides, isn't it?
Okay.
We have debates, you know.
Which side to take?
Which side to take. So a lot of the, you know, the so-called, I don't know how to put this, but there's a lot of YouTube videos about, you know, you are one side and I'm one side. Let's talk about our sides. But is that really dialogue, or is that just, you know, showing the division, no? So I think what this form of dialogue is talking about is that it's a circular process, right?
Okay.
Everybody is in a circle. We all have our perspectives, and we want to generate something that's new. So the book tells you how to generate this new meaning. You know, dialogue, he says, is about how you make meaning together, right? And that's something that is amazing. Why? Because you have your individual limitations. I have my individual limitations. And if we keep talking at one another, how do we see what's new? No? And dialogue is one of these things that will allow you to uncover really what's new.
Right.
And that's something that is amazing and worth striving for.
Right.
Whether it's, you know, in our conversations about politics, whether it's in our conversations about how to work together,
And
in
innovation
building
as well.
teams,
Yeah.
in innovations, yeah. So it's definitely worth a read. This guy, William Isaacs, has done a lot of work in corporate settings, in peace building settings, and it's kind of cut across, no? So please read it, Zen. We can talk about it another time.
Yes, it sounds like I'm adding to my ever-growing reading list.
That
but
is
it definitely
still,
sounds
it's
really
still
interesting.
relatively untouched.
For sure. You know, the past 3 years has been intense to say the least. But you know, I'm looking forward to read that book also, because I think moving forward, I realized that there are more conversations to be had. There are more. I realized that actually a lot of times, you know, it's a given that in a corporate setting or in a professional setting, you will deliver the results that you promise, or you deliver to the, I guess, expectation, the performance that you said you would. But what I realized, that what enables that is really just dialogues and relationships that we have with one another. It's something that people cannot take away from you. It is an impact that you can give, and it is an impact that people cannot take away. So I think definitely this book about dialogues is definitely worth bumping up into the backlog of the reading list. What's another one though?
Another one, since we've talked a lot about systems,
Yeah.
The Fifth Discipline,
Okay.
Peter Senge, legend. It just helps to get an appreciation of how things actually work, you know, and allows us to finally see things holistically.
Right.
Not everything is separate, you know. It's a very Buddhist thing about, you know, if something causes something and causes something, and you know, there's this chain reaction.
Right.
And you imagine that there are many things that are caused at the same time, crisscrossing, no? So thinking in systems means being able to appreciate the whole. And I think this is a skill that will be necessary. you know, especially when we do social innovation work.
Yeah, definitely. I saw a diagram around, you know, the many wicked problems, so-called wicked problems, and how it's interlinked, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one really fascinating diagram that I saw. But I cannot remember who produced it. Do you remember who produced it?
I don't remember who produced it, but I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think one of the key takeaways of that is then we begin to realize that one issue that you are specialized in is always interlinked to another.
Something else. Yeah.
And doesn't that call us to collaborate? I think that's that's really the call to action for me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, that's why, I mean, serving in the mental health space in the past 3 years, it just reaffirms that mental health cannot be taught in vacuum. There's so many other factors, right? That's why, you know, we continue to hear people want peer-to-peer support, right? They don't necessarily just want to talk to professionals. What about people that are similar to them? They want to feel heard, they want to feel recognized, appreciated, so on and so forth, right? So it's not just about professionals. Accessibility to professionals is also about the peers. We saw how impactful lived experience can be, right? You know, we saw the impact that caregivers can really affect the outcome, right? And we need to take care of the caregivers.
Yep.
So on and so forth, right? So definitely another very interesting piece, the fifth discipline. Good things come in 3. So the last one.
Good things come in 3.
Yes.
Oh, the third one, maybe a book that I'm carrying with me right now, which is the one that I've recommended to you and your friend. No?
Yes.
The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. No?
Okay.
And this one is a little bit more technical, but if you bear with it, there are great fruits to be told, because it is really about how we do education differently, you know, and how we really privilege the learner and the learner's experiences and their understanding of the situation that they are going through, you know. Because, for example, let's talk about refugees. No, refugees have went through their violence and stuff like that. They too have a sense of what's happening, you know, and they have knowledge, right? So how do we then really teach them? You know, do we use their knowledge, their experiences to build something, or do we want to impose like rote memory, right? And that's, you know, Freire has a really great way of saying it. He said, this is the banking model of education. You know, it's like a bank, you know, you just give. That's it, no? And a lot of this ties back to, you know, William Isaacs, because it's about dialogue. Dialogue is the way knowledge is created. Our engagement with the people who are suffering allows us to learn something as well. So this process of relating to one another, that's the key. You know? And so it's really a values kind of book. You know, I think it's the kind of book that should touch you in the heart, despite the language being a little bit archaic. No, but even if you have a sense of, you know, the conscience that he is trying to put forward, there will be something meaningful to take away.
Right.
So progressively more complicated, I guess.
It's true. I think the kind of books that you always recommend are the ones that has the potential to kind of change your perspective, right? So I think that's what I appreciate about it. I, on the other hand, are reading more, I guess, more quote unquote mainstream books, right? The one I'm reading right now is it's called Obstacle is the Way. I don't know what's up with our
Obstacle is the Way. Tell me more about Obstacle is the Way.
You know, I don't know what's up with our book titles today. It's very doom and gloom. You know, the pedagogy of the oppressed. You know, Obstacle is the Way. It's based on Stoicism, right? It's based on Stoicism,
cool.
And it's really just talking about the very practical way of looking at obstacle and instead of going around it, you know, how do you go through it? That's why it's called, you know, Obstacle is the Way. It's quite radical in the sense that you know, let's say, for example, if you see an obstacle, there's one thought that talks about, let's look at it half cup full, right?
Yeah.
Let's find a positive around it, let's work through it and stuff like that. But this book is suggesting no. You need to see every single obstacle as an opportunity. It needs to be a flip a total flip. Every time you see an obstacle, what is the opportunity, and how can you break this problem down and this obstacle down into chunks that you can work on?
Right.
Because the other alternative is that you are releasing control, and therefore you'll definitely be worse off in that situation. Now, if you have an obstacle that you want to go through, you must be able to have that total flip, not the whole see the half cup empty, because that's not gonna half cup full. That's not gonna work. That's
right.
I guess the premise of that book, right? Pretty interesting.
Yep.
Very self-helpy, which is probably not your cup of tea. But you know, it has some nuggets to that I've took from it for sure, in terms of how do you, I guess, liberate yourself from the circumstances. I felt like that's kind of what it is, right? Because there's a lot of, it's not saying that you can control what happens to you. In fact, the book says that there's a lot of things in the world that happens to you that you cannot control. But what you can control, as the cliche says, that how you respond, right? But it kind of puts in a lot of different examples, and, you know, put it in a very concise manner. It's not very long-winded in that sense. I would think that the language is fairly easy to understand as well. Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm reading halfway as well.
Yeah, I think that's super important, no? Because at the end of the day, well, the world is not always a good place, you know. And a lot of things that are happening. And if you are in the wrong state of mind, everything can seem a problem. You know?
For sure.
And really, sometimes this reframing is important, not just because it allows you to feel better, you know, but it's also about seeing hope. At the end of the day, you know, we can't keep thinking about, you know, the refugee problem. The refugee problem is that they are illegal. They're illegal, then we cannot do anything. Then
end of story, right?
We can't end the story there.
Correct.
You know, and that's really the point, isn't it? So these sort of reframings are important. We are not saying that, you know, you become super over optimistic and
it's
they're
not
illegal.
right.
We can make them legal. We can't.
can't.
But we know that there are certain things that can still be done.
How do we make it work, right?
Yeah,
for sure. I think that's what is interesting about the book, because it's not about toxic positivity. Let's put it out there, right? It's not about toxic positivity. In fact, there are many aspects of it that seems rather surprising from a Stoic book, in a sense, because you know how the cliche, I guess stereotypical view of the words being Stoic is basically you're kind of like nonchalant about things, right? Neutral all the time. But little did I realize, they say, you know, there are philosophies about Stoicism that talks about how, like, you know, you need to know that nobody is going to come and save you. You know, and I think the whole idea about that is accepting the reality for what it is, and to be able to then spur the next course of action. Which is why I guess I like the book so far, simply because I think I have a very strong bias towards action, as you know, after many years of dealing with me, right? I have a very strong bias towards action. I think you know, that's why this book is quite interesting to me, so far. So, last question. If you could slip a bookmark
oh my god,
with a message into books of, you know, all these hopefuls that are, you know, learning or serving the community, you know, what would that message be on that bookmark itself?
My colleagues who are working with me will be very proud of me for quoting this. Not the Young Lives colleagues, but the you know, my university colleagues will be very proud of me. The world has been given to us not to contemplate, but to transform. It's linked to what you are saying, to a bias towards action. You know? And the whole point is that, you know, we can't keep contemplating the world, because at the end of the day, we will know what's up, but if we don't do something about it, it goes nowhere. You know, you can be the one who do it. You know?
This reminds me of something. I think I read this one thing where it talks about, if you don't, let's say you are contemplating and you know, violently disagree with this current situation or whatever it is, but you never do anything, right? You are just accepting the status quo to continue to happen. You are part of the problem for not taking action, because, you know, you constantly just disagree and you're not taking action. By not taking action, you are perpetuating the very reality that you disagree with.
I totally agree. And that's why entrepreneurial spirit is something that is very valuable, isn't it?
Most definitely, and in areas that I least suspect as well, right?
Yeah.
Which is extremely important. So we're up to the hour. We can do this much longer if we want to, but I think it's a good point to stop over here. After listening to that very profound quote, we should all reflect on the realities that we want to change, right? So finally, Douglas, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Sam.
Always a pleasure speaking to you.